or losing your tax exempt status. So protecting both exempt status and privacy are obviously very important to your club. Our speaker today is somebody who's very knowledgeable about this topic and has dealt with a lot of clubs on some of their specific issues in this area. And he probably doesn't need an introduction since you've heard from him before. Please join me in welcoming Kevin Riley back.
Thanks, Sue. I get tired just listening to that earlier presentation. He does speak quickly, and there's so much to cover when you're going along. But just to show you how timely he was, the last email I get before I came up here is it's not an attack, don't know. But it's an email from an insurance company, and the title is "The Growing Threat of Cyber Attacks on Small and Mid-Sized Businesses." And it's a sales pitch to buy cyber insurance, but just those interested in it came in just right before that. I love Fred's comment about he's got the international office and he's in Miami, spending all the time in Miami. I deal with a lot of partners from South America. We have our meetings in Miami all the time. And I was speaking to them one time, and I said to myself, you know, the really nice thing about Miami is that it's so close to the United States. And they actually do, you know, they say, well, yeah. Oh, okay, they just joke as you're going through there. What we're talking about now is not the cyber threats. It's all the old threats that we have out there. I mean, it's the threats that you're, as a club, you're facing, that you're going through, that you're looking at, that there's just so many different ways that you can forget that you're a private club. And I think that's one of the issues that you're looking at. With the recession that we're coming out of, with the threat that was on all of these clubs and everything else for survivability, clubs got to the point where they wanted to do other things in order to get to the point where they could survive. So they did things that weren't necessarily running in with their private status. It was things like, you know, some of the off-premises catering, some were looking to go. We're going to cover a lot of that stuff and why it's important to at least consider those issues when you're going through. So the first thing going back is, what is a private club? And when I'm going through some of these things, what I think you need to do is look at how does your club fall away from these things, okay? A place where people with a common bond congregate for social and recreational purposes. Okay, you're not a business. Okay, this is a social aspect to it when you're going through. The purpose of a private club is to serve its members. By definition, it is a place not open to the public. So if we're looking at this and we've got, you know, very common, how often do you allow the public to come onto your facility and looking at it? Individuals must be accepted for membership before they can join. They have to have a selective criteria. The criteria during the recession was if the check didn't bounce, they were good. Is that really, how selective is that as a criteria? When you're going out there, when you put a billboard up along the side of the road, say, come join us. When you put an ad in the Washington Post or in the Boston Globe or one of those things to say, hey, come join us and we'll take you in. Those are all issues that you've got when you're looking at it, that you're saying, okay, do we fully fit there? Long-standing mission of serving social, not business purpose. Limits activities and access to members, their immediate family, and accompanying guests. Applies restrictive guest policies. Okay, it's not selling it out to anybody that's out there and going through. It's, you know, the privacy, the aspect of it. It's controlled by its members. And then you want to limit each class of membership in scope and size, because you just don't want to look at some of these issues out there where you've got so many different categories of members that anybody can join, and who's really truly a member and who's not a member when you're looking at it. And the club has to dictate its maximum size. One of the issues you're running into with some of the competition you have out there is particularly with things like the city clubs. Some of them are getting so big, you really have to look at it and say, how restrictive is that club really? And if it's not restrictive at all, is it truly a private club? And I think the courts would say probably not. Why does it matter? I mean, that's the whole thing. The question I got more more than anything else is, why does it matter if we lose our tax exemption? Well, that's different than losing your privacy. So, but they're saying, because we don't make any money anyway. Well, if you don't make any money, then you're gonna go bankrupt. But, you have to have something in there. But, why is it important to look at? It destroys the essence of what it means to be a club. The whole thing you're looking at is, why do people, you've got the big issue right now, why do people want to join a club? You're having such a problem getting millennials coming in and bringing them in and doing some of those things. It's because they don't necessarily see the need for the club. And if you're going out there and if you don't make it private, you don't make it exclusive, there are some issues. Public accommodation laws, we're going to go into that in a little bit more detail. Truly private clubs are exempt from certain federal and state laws, and we'll cover a couple of those. And you may lose the right to determine policies to the membership or limit access to your property. If you go out there and if you allow almost any group that wants to come in, then a group that you don't want to come in, they can say, wait a minute, you're a public accommodation. You get too many people out there. What I like about this one is private clubs are protected by the First Amendment by the freedom of association, but more so than that, it's the freedom not to associate. And that's one of the big things you got, so that you have the ability to go out there and say, hey, this isn't what's going on. They're exempt from the Titles 2 and 7 of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, prohibits different treatment of people in public places and employers of employees. One of the first things that you should do if you ever get a challenge to your status or by an employee is to say, well, we're not covered by that act. Country Club of Virginia has a ruling from the federal government saying they weren't covered by this act. It goes back many, many years when they first did it, but it's something they've got in can. So whenever an issue comes up, they say, oh no, we're not covered, and they show it. Titles 1 and 3 of the ADA prohibits different treatment of those with disabilities in employment situations and in public places. That may not necessarily apply to clubs, although the definition of private club under ADA is much narrower than it is under the Civil Rights Act. So looking at these things, looking at these issues, that's some of the things that you get. So private clubs can treat people as different if you're going to be there. But since the federal court systems are really protective of people's civil rights, they're going to look for a reason to say you're not public. And what happens is when you go out there and you do some of this stuff, you're giving them all these reasons to say that you're not truly a private club. So that's some of those things are out there. The Supreme Court balances the need to protect the First Amendment to ensure the need for equal treatment of all individuals. So when you're looking at this stuff, this is the type of thing that they're looking for when they're going through it. So there's really 3 cases, but the 2 of them I'm going to cover are Board of Directors of Rotary International versus Rotary Club, and Roberts versus USJCs. When you're looking at that, those are a couple of cases by the Supreme Court. I love it. We have SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States. We have POTUS, the President of the United States. FLOTUS, the First Lady, and now we have WOTUS. So I think that you're using the acronym a little too much when you're going through there, but the WOTUS of the United States. But if you're looking at it, if these 2 entities didn't get their tax exemption because they had no selectivity in membership. They did not limit the size of the club membership. They didn't limit participation. They allowed advertising membership openings and club events, and they used clubs for business purposes by members. So conceptually, it was not a private club. It was a business club. AAA tried to get private club status at one point in time, American Automobile Association, because they were saying, hey, that's something that we're just a club, we're just a bunch of car dealers, car enthusiasts, and want to come through. And they said, nah, you're really a business. Public accommodations laws. I've got one of my clients who was sued by a member, and the court came down and said, no, the member was wrong, the member can't get it. But by the way, the club's a public accommodation. And I was like, wow, that was a really crummy decision. You won one battle, but you just opened yourself up for 100 more when you go through it and looking at it. If you fall within the public accommodation laws, you've got some real issues. I mean, as far as being open to anybody who wants to walk in the door. And New England's pretty strict on that. If you're over a certain size, allow unrelated business income in there, some of those type of things, they're going to say you're a public accommodation. Look, the cautionary caseload, some out there, Long Island Club, the non-members regularly use the golf and tennis facilities, pro shops, and pay for those services. Club hosted and engaged in numerous social events for non-members. In some events, further trade and business of activities, not social ones. How many people allow non-members to take lessons from your golf and tennis pros? Anybody? Can they advertise on the internet saying that they give these? There's one of my clients, and these are still my clients, even though I advise them against doing some of these things. But one of my clients out there has, actually the pro's name happens to be Ben Hogan. And Ben Hogan has his own webpage where it's out there and advertises for lessons on the facility. So you look at it and say, okay, that's an issue that you've got because they're going out there. One of my other clients sent me an email saying, this came across my desk. It was like one of those solicitations like I just read on the insurance company when you're looking at it. And it was for an insurance, a member of the club who was an insurance, who was a financial advisor, who sends out a blind email to everybody in the city, I'm sure, advertising that they could come to the club for a financial seminar. Now that went out publicly, okay? That wasn't him sending it to his client base and allowing them to come to the club. This was just across the board. That's something you're gonna lose on. That's what happened with the Arizona Platinum Club. Non-member events were advertised on the internet in other ways accessible to the general public. So they would go out there and they would actually advertise saying, hey, we're gonna have this function at the club. General public is invited. Neither one of those things are out there. Okay, so looking at this truly private, do you admit every candidate that applies? And if that's the case, do you want to admit the son of Bernie Madoff? I mean, if that's, that's a pretty, if you allow everybody else in, you can't say no to him. And since we're in the Harvard area, you want to admit Henry Gates Jr. to your club. Or do you not? But you wouldn't have the choice if you allow everybody in there. So, yes.
How about charitable outings? Charitable outing that may advertise to the public. Having that.
Okay, the way you get around some of these things and is the fact that charitable outing goes to both the privacy aspect and the tax aspect. Okay. The privacy aspect is it's bad. I mean, clearly it's bad if you can advertise it to the general public. Because you're opening yourself up to the general public. But if you're trying to reduce the impact of it, what you're looking at is you go out there and they're advertising their charity. They're advertising and they're saying it's going to be held at this location. Okay, they're not advertising. But if you are a principal club and the reason why they're holding it there is because they want everybody to come, there's some real issues. You can't get around the fact that if you open up your course to anybody and a charity type of tournament, you're going to be looked at as not being truly private. It's just to the extent that what they're taking and how far they want to go and who wants to challenge you on that issue of hosting the favorite charity of the area. So again, they're advertising the charity and mentioning where the tournament is. Big difference in advertising the fact that it's there. Okay, again, ADA regulations don't apply to truly private clubs. I mentioned the fact that they define private as much narrower than some of these other things. We always say that if someone's doing a renovation, they should become ADA compliant anyway as you're going through because it's just the right thing to do. But it doesn't force some of these older locations to have to redo everything to get it in there. You can get away with just making it accessible with a piece of plywood or something like that, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to renovate everything going through there. Again, the biggest thing I think is that without private status, you can't pick and choose who you want to be doing. To me, that is probably the key issue you've got out there. Even more so than the laws that apply and whatever. Without private status, you lose your right to determine your internal policies. One of the things I was talking about beforehand was, as a member of a club, you don't have a right to free speech. Well, if you're not private, you probably do, because you're paying something and you're getting something for it. So it's a few issues that are there, and again, I think you lose what makes you unique. Now, okay, that's all. That's kind of the privacy. That's the big thing That's what we're focusing on, is, you know, the private status of our club. When we go up there and when NCA goes up on the hill, they're really talking about, okay, here's this private club. We shouldn't have all of these things apply to us because we're a private club. And, you know, you got to look at that and you got to think about those things, you know, and then you get into the tax exempt issues. One of the arguments we made with the 990s, with all the disclosure requirements on the Form 990s, was that we're a truly private club. We shouldn't have to make all these disclosures because that goes against the total concept of what we're saying we are. So when you look at those things and you say, hey, we're truly private, then, well, if we're truly private, why do we have to do these things when you go through that? But then a tax exempt club. Tax exempt club is organized for pleasure, recreation, or other non-profitable purposes, and most of your activities have to be conducted as above there. No part of the club's net earning benefit can benefit the member, and that's, you know, called private enrollment. Biggest thing there is membership categories. The categories reflect the benefit they receive. I'm dealing with one club right now, which is being taken over by the members from the developer. And I was reading the agreement just now, and they have about 30 different honorary members, which is where the developer's keeping the money and they're going to pass it out to all of these different things. Well, I think we might be able to get around it, but the big issue there is that these guys aren't paying anything for the membership. They're getting the use of it, so they're benefiting personally by all the other members in the club. So I think what we're doing is we're putting part of the purchase price of the members to, when they're coming in, as purchasing these honorary memberships and breaking it down that way, so that when you're looking at it, these guys are basically just becoming lifetime members and have paid all their dues up front. So that's, you know, one way to look at some of those things. But conceptually, the IRS has come down specifically and said that those guys are not members. Excuse me, those guys are benefiting personally for what you've got. I had another club in Honolulu where the Japanese had a lot of money, where they used to come over and they want to join the club in Honolulu. Well, they were going to charge them $100,000 and let them play 4 months a year. So you had to figure out a way to say that that was proportionate to the benefit they were receiving, so that the other members of the club didn't get the, you know, unreasonable benefit. So it's a big issue when you've got there. No written policy that discriminates on the basis of race, color, or religion. You can still discriminate on the basis of sex if you're going out there, but you can't do it on race, color, or religion. I still have one of my clients is an all-male club. You know, that still works in today's day and age. Although with Bruce Jenner, I'm not sure how that fits anymore when you're looking at it. Interesting comments from his club saying that, you know, Bruce Jenner is still a member of this club and we don't comment on any of the things going through there. So, you know, big issues when you're out there. And again, the personal contact. Personal contact, we've got commingling and fellowship among members. The personal contact is the thing we're going to get into it a little bit later. The personal contact is the whole issue that you run into when you do food to go, off-premises catering, a lot of that stuff. You know, how much personal contact is there really when you do that? When they looked at city clubs, one of the things they were talking about was rooms, and I just really running a hotel, and I just basically said, you know, rooms facilitate commingling of members. I just don't know to what extent you want to have that known. Relationship between private and tax exempt, they're not interchangeable principles. Okay, two sets of criteria are distinct. May satisfy one but not the other. But the big thing is, and I think we might have a few of those here. You get 277 clubs, which are taxable member-owned clubs. Taxable member-owned clubs can be private clubs. So when you know, it's a type of analysis you've got in what truly makes you a private club. Even taxable member-owned clubs are normally formed on the tax exempt status of the state. So for state purposes, on not-for-profit statutes of the state, but for state purposes, normally they're going to do that. Okay, so when we're talking about tax exempt, you've got the IRS who's out there. They're looking at it. They're coming in. I guess the you know, IRS has changed a little bit. Remember, it took an IRS agent to convict Al Capone. That's one of their recruiting posters. So they're pushing out the fact that, hey, we're going to find this stuff, we're going to investigate it, we're going to go through. The exempt organization division balances traditional provisions of service and balance with an outreach and increased focus on enforcement. So what they're saying is they're not just going to provide advice anymore. You're going through that, they're going to come out and they're going to put the focus on there. The budget was increased, the budget applied to enforcement was increased to a third of their budget. Their overall budget was cut, but the part of it that goes to enforcement's out there. They aren't out to get clubs. There's not a whole lot of clubs under examination at any one time, but I do have a couple of clubs that I've got that are under examination right now. And they did revoke the tax exempt status of several clubs that in 2014. Probably in 2000, well, between 2013 and 2014, they probably did about 30. But out of those clubs, they were the clubs that advertised in the yellow pages. They were the ones that had 40% non-member business. They were the ones who made no attempt to pretend that they were tax exempt. But the IRS says you can't give up your tax exemption, they have to pull it. So you can carry it for a while, knowing that you're truly not going to be cut down. No, that is not true. Some have, particularly, actually the IRS almost gives you 3 years to get your house back in order. But depending on why they're pulling it, okay? So yes, I have known occasions where they've come back and they've gotten their tax exempt status. But that was ones that they probably shouldn't have lost in the first place. And they weren't represented well, they just gave up or something like that. I had one tax exempt club that their unrelated business income was about 25%. I convinced the IRS that they were working hard to get it back down to 15, that they were looking at it, because 15 is only a safe harbor. So when you look at those things, but the IRS sees it as a bright line test, but the statute says it's a safe harbor. So you look at some of those things. I thought I had a pretty interesting argument. I said, oh, let's look at the number of events that are member and the number of events that are non-member. And it's just not all the big dollar events were non-member, and all the little ones were a member when you're going through it. But you know, they're not out to get clubs that they are looking at it. Everybody's heard of the 2014 problems with the exempt organization branch of the IRS, with the fact that they weren't approving the applications for exemptions for all of the Tea Party type organizations that were out there. And I will tell you right now that the denial of tax exemption for every one of those entities was probably correct. Not one of them fit the definition of truly tax exempt. However, every single one of the liberal organizations that did the exact same thing were approved. And it's not so much they didn't approve one, it's the fact that they didn't treat it consistently across the board. But those type of organizations don't fit the definition of tax exempt anyway, but they're getting away with it. You have to treat them, refer to consistency a whole lot today. You have to treat them consistent when you go through it and look at those things and go through there. But with those problems, the exempt organization branch is having some real issues now. I had a club that was selected for audit probably 4 months ago with 9 months left on the statute. And that's not what they do. So the first thing they had to do was come in and ask us to extend the statute of limitations so they can audit the club. And how are the things selected? I have been told that right now you are not selected for an audit under the exempt organization unless you're in two specific categories, which is hospitals and university bookstores, unless you have someone reporting something about you. So that they're really just, I've got one non-club client who filed their 2014 the 2013 tax return on November 10th, which is the last possible day, 11/15 is the last possible day for calendar year. And they received a letter saying that they were under examination by 12/31. Agent hadn't seen the return, they already selected for examination. So that's what I've been told, is that they're so limited on resources in the exempt organization that unless someone pushes something against you, you're not going to get it. Where that happens, I don't know if any of you have foundations. Well, what I've seen a couple times is people don't like these foundations, and they'll set up something, well, they say there's self-dealing between the club and the foundation, things like that. So you need to be really careful when you're looking at those things, go through there. So when the IRS does come out to look at it, what are they going to look at? Organizational test, filing requirements, whether you file, investment income, non-member income. We had the question today about the Calcutta. They look at gambling, gaming, and all the fundraising and stuff like that when it's out there. Big thing on member-related issues is the private inurement. That's the thing where they seem to be focusing the most on what type of how do the members benefit inappropriately when you're looking at it. Whether you have public disclosure, and then if you have a golf tournament or a professional golf tournament there, that generates sometimes sale of club properties. They ask for everything in their kitchen sink when they come out, asking for records. Club documents, the reason why they look at that is to see if you're truly a private club, because they want to look at whether you're private, or they even worry about whether you still meet the definition of tax exempt. So they're going to look at the club brochures and see if you're advertising things that are either non-traditional or things that have some other issues going through there. Club contracts with the professionals and your members, any prior IRS examination, letter report, audited statements. One of the big things that we've got in this audit that I've got right now is this was a club set up in the 30s, and you bought a share of stock. And now the members can sell the share of stock for more money than they paid for it. So the IRS is coming in and saying, hey, is that private inurement to the members? What's interesting about this particular club is that in 1978, they were examined for the exact same issue. They went to the national office came back and said, no, that's not private inurement. The agent appealed that to some higher level, evidently the agent didn't like the answer. So, but going through that was some of the issues that they came in with and they were looking at. Question came up to me at lunchtime looking at these things. You know, the big thing that they look at is how much unrelated business income. That goes both to privacy and to tax status when you're looking at this stuff. And unlike any other not-for-profit, revenue is defined differently for a club. And I think all of you guys know, you've seen the questionnaire, you've seen the short form questionnaire that you have to fill out, looking at some of those things, figuring that out to see whether you truly is it member income or not. But when you have a not-for-profit board member who comes from something other than a club, the first thing he's going to say is, how come you're paying tax on investment income? Because for all the other not-for-profits, it's not taxable. But you know, with a club, it's basically gross revenues less exempt function income and directly connected deductions is defines unrelated business income. So what the rule is with the law is, if you can't prove it's member income, it's not member income. You know, it's not guilty until, innocent until proven guilty. It's guilty until proven innocent. So that's why no matter what pain it is with getting those forms filled out and all that other stuff, those are some of the issues. Exempt function income, dues, fees, charges, similar amounts paid by members, interest and late fees paid by members. I walked into a couple of clubs where that was reported as unrelated business income. Investment income set aside for charitable purpose, and then the member spouses choose member when you're looking at that. If a member pays, that's the only question you have to ask. That's the short form. The member pays and it's not reimbursed. So that comes in and that's saying that that's member income going through that. But otherwise, is it a gratuitous payment, personal social purpose of the member, direct business objective, unrelated activities. The fact that it's a member-sponsored event does not make it member income. And that's one of the major things you're looking at. You still have to ask all these questions when you're going through. 15 to 35%, no more than 15% of the usage may be from non-member income. This is stuff that we've covered for as long as I've been doing this, going through there, but questions still come up. And how do you determine the 15% what you're looking at? Non-traditional activities, this is where I'm going to cover some time in looking at that in relation to how that impacts both private status and some of these other things. Unrelated business income, non-exempt activities income is the big thing there. It's just some of the generalized things that you got from non-member revenue, golf outings, banquet, weddings. If your trial memberships are too quick, there's a terminology out there that you're making one member per day, so the function becomes a member function. Well, that doesn't work. The bars in Texas, you have to pay $5 when you walk in the door in order to become a member, in order to buy liquor in the dry counties. IRS says that that's not really a member. What was really interesting on that is that there's a club right next to the state house in Austin, Texas, and their board of directors were all the legislatures from the state house, and they insisted that since Texas state law said that they were members, and they didn't have to pay tax on that. Luckily, we convinced them to change their mind when they went through there, because it's pretty specific out there going through there. Let's look at non-traditional activities. And this is something I think really gets into, because when you get into these type of issues, you're doing things that the IRS thinks that a club doesn't do. Most of these things, or many of these things, are going to broach the whole concept of privacy as well. Because when you're looking at some of these, and when you, so whether they define a non-traditional activity as a prohibited business or activity, insubstantial, trivial, and non-recurring, not in furtherance of your exempt purpose. One of the first things that you're going to see on the 990 is what's your exempt purpose. And if these things are not in furtherance to that, is an issue. But it's the facts and circumstances. Even if these non-traditional activities are performed for a member, the IRS takes the position that that is non-member income. Where that comes into account a lot of times is when they're looking at corporate sponsored members, for example, or corporate members, excuse me, not corporate sponsored. They're looking at corporate members and they're saying corporations cannot commingle. So therefore, that's automatically going to be non-member business. That's why we emphasize the whole aspect of corporate sponsored when you're looking at some of those things. No more than 5% of gross income, but it's an unofficial position. It's in the educational stuff for the IRS to its agents' guidance. Right now, there's a position out there that this 5% does not include dues when you're trying to compute the number. I can't say how much I disagree with that position when we're going through there, but it's been published in several places, and I get calls from my clients all the time as soon as it comes out and it's published. 5% has to include dues. I mean, because if you're looking at total revenue, you're not in the food and beverage business. You're not in the golf business. You're in the dues business. That's how you pay for most of this stuff. So to take the position that dues don't count is really something that's out there. I was trying to figure out whether I wanted to put this one in with the legal liability issues or with the non-traditional activities, and I decided I had enough information on the legal liability, so I threw it in here. How many people allow off-site wine sales? Anybody? Yes. Anybody do that? Wow. I can skip these slides. This is the only chapter that has ever that's been a response. People, members love their wines, their wine. They love to be able to have club within the club where you have wine sales, where the vendor will come out, he'll do a dinner, and then what will happen is that they can buy cases to take home. Okay, that's very common around the country. It's getting to the point that I've got a couple of cases I'm consulting on where their wine sales are 10 to 20%, off-site wine sales are 10 to 20% of the total food and beverage sales. Because the members are just using it like a private ordering system. The three major concerns: loss of private tax status, because now you're in the business of selling liquor. I mean, who are you competing against? Loss of your liquor license, and loss of insurance protection, because you're not supposed to be selling this stuff when you're looking at it. Quick question: does anybody have an off-premises liquor license, the ability to sell off-premises? I don't care whether you do it or not. Does anyone have anything like that? In Virginia,
In New York, I think
in
you get
New
a
York,
one-day one. You get a.
you can go one day to do that. Well, I know in Virginia, they were going so bad as to saying that if you had your license for your clubhouse and you had a golf tournament and you put a tent out, like, halfway out of the course and serve food and drink at that point in time, that your license for the club did not count for that. I had a club in Utah call me the other day, and they were one of the ones that had like 20% sales. They were trying to figure out whether they should still do it or not. And my first question to them, well, do you have a license to sell off premises? And they were like, well, I'm assuming we do, and I don't want to know if I don't. That's not a good answer, but it's looking at it, you got to figure out what it's going to be, because okay, if you couldn't sell liquor in your club, do you think it might have an impact on your survivability? So I think that is something that's there. Is it a private club liquor license? They have some restrictions than others. Again, we've talked about off-site. And does it allow for sales to non-members or only members? That would be another thing. Some of these private club liquor licenses, you can only sell to members, which is why you go through some of these gimmicks to make the members in some of these locations. Does it specifically prohibit package sales, and what type of alcoholic beverage sales is the club actually engaging in? I had a couple of clients who had wine cellars. They had big wine cellars. They would sell the stuff they go through. They had a wine store on the premise. They had an off-site sale license, so they were covered there. But the only court case out there that went to non-traditional activities that was specifically going through the courts, as opposed to just going through IRS opinions, is the sale of liquor for off-premises consumption. It's the only one that was actually said through the courts that you can't do that and still be a private club. So that's something that you need to consider when you're looking at it, particularly now with the ease of buying across state lines and having it shipped to your house and everything else. What you can do at your club is you can set up a wine dinner, let the vendor be there, and then the vendor can ship it to them directly. Some of those things, so you can still provide the service to them, because that's what all these clubs are saying. This is the service they want. It's kind of a concierge type service. They're looking at it. It's the service they want. They want to go through, and they're looking at it. The risk violation of liquor license results in club and individual subject to fines. Okay, guys, it's not just the clubs. It's the individuals in the club. I mean, I don't know the reference in this state, but there has to be someone who's Virginia or ABC licensed in Virginia going through there all the time. If you look at the different, in New England, you've got the state controlling the package stores in some places. You've got liquor stores in Rhode Island, and then those different things going through there. Suspension or revocation of liquor license, and again the loss of there. Since you don't do any off-site wine sales, I'm just going to kind of skip through this, but it's basically something you're going to get some pressure on from what I've seen, because where I also hear it is that the members are coming back and say, well, for my club in Arizona, I can buy the liquor, so why can't I buy it through you guys? So it's something that you're going to be hearing from. Okay. Another issue that's out there going to both privacy status and tax exempt status is social media. Looking at it, social media is out there. It's a great thing. You can use it. How many people have a Facebook page? Okay. Do you have access to members or everybody?
Well, if you look at this right now, whether you want or not, Facebook, I just found out ours, and I had to get in touch with Facebook, so I could getting access to it. It was already up there. It was created.
And that's the thing, that if you don't have your own Facebook page, one of your members are going to create the page. And if the members create the page, you've got those exact issues that you're talking about. But then you've got copyright issues, you've got infringement, they're using your logo, they're using all this other stuff, you're trying to protect that stuff, and they're out there doing that. It's also, what are you going to post on it? I was looking at a Facebook page, and I think I mentioned this earlier, which was full of pictures of kids. When I was looking at the release, I have a real problem with that when I'm looking at it. But there are some benefits to that. Cementing social ties, streamlining communications, helps the schedule, fostering highly meaningful and enjoyable association. So you can use it for good things. You can use it for out there. But how private are you really if you've got a Facebook page which anybody can get to? You can advertise on it, that you're advertising that your club is open for business for any weddings that you may have and anything like that. Now, I would prefer that you're on there saying, here's the club. If you're interested in membership, call somebody so that they have to talk to them, as opposed to saying, you can rent my facilities through this Facebook page. You know, big issue that you've got, and a lot of the clubs are using that. You know, I got a lot of club clients, so I've got somebody doing something wrong pretty much in every area. And one of the big things on this one was I thought it was relatively simple, was I just wanted to change the phrasing. They were saying, you know, well, here's our wedding deal, here's the pricing, here's how you book. And I said, you can say, here's some weddings we've done for members. For more information, boom. So, you know, you're keeping the privacy stuff when you're still going there. So looking at it going through. Private Club Advantage, you can use it to leverage unique relationships, kind of a personalized newsletter. You can have a two-way dialogue to help your members understand. That's only if you have a restricted page. That's the stuff behind that's kind of like your web page that people just do on Facebook now, as opposed to the web page when you're looking at it. You were talking about you had to take over. I gave a board retreat for National Country Club. And I said to them, do you have a web page for the country club? And they said, no, we don't believe in doing that. And this was the next slide I put up. And that was the link that they had to the web page, the Facebook page. And before the slide was up there, about 10 seconds, every one of the members of the board of directors had the device out, was on the website, and started going through the pictures, and we're identifying all of the, I mean, at least these people look like they're having a good time. But maybe too good a time, you know, I don't know, but it looks like they're having a good time. And this was completely unsupported by the club. The club didn't know it existed. I think they now have it under their control right now, but it's an issue. How many people have a social media policy?
I was going to say, there's an app out there that you can actually monitor all of your social media activity.
Right.
So, you know, if I had members, guests at the club and they tagged that they were in Dedham, I have an app that I can see what they're tagged, but you can also follow all your competitors. And I follow all you guys. And I just post, but it's more or less for me to make sure if I have a staff member that maybe doing something wrong, and then post it on their attention. But it's scary how they're doing it.
Right. Right. I mean, we were talking, you know, we just had a cybersecurity issue there and how you can hack and get into all these things. I mean, this is why everything's so accessible. And I was just mentioning to Fred that we broke every rule going forward because he took an outside key and loaded it on my private computer. So who knows what he left in there? And he knows how to leave stuff. So when you go through, you know, a lot of clubs have social media policies for employees. That's an employee handbook. We covered that this morning. But you really need to have a social media policy for your members as well. You don't want to put it in your bylaws. You don't want to put it in like that. You want to put it in the rules that they, you know, what can they post about the club that's there? Advertising, another issue that's out there. The IRS says advertising is prima facie evidence that the club is not organized and operated exclusively for pleasure, recreation, and non-profit purposes. Now, this regulation was set out there when the limit on the amount of unrelated business income you can do is only 5%. Okay, but this is still out there. So if you're above the 15%, every revocation that I've seen, when they're talking about the unrelated business income being over 15%, they comment on the fact that they were out in the public advertising for the business. So that's one of the big issues you've got. And that also kills you as far as privacy is concerned when you're looking at it. So there is a lot of tie-ins when you're going through there. Reciprocal income. Do you have any city clubs left in the room or yacht clubs? Okay. Major concern for city clubs, both for privacy and tax issues. It's going through and it's the largest source of unrelated business income for most city clubs when you're looking at it. I just got a couple of numbers. This is the gross receipts from several different city clubs, and all this information was taken from guide style. I mean, you've got public information that's out there that's going through. But what I thought was interesting, these clubs range from $5.5 million to $35 million, and the dues run from $2.5 million up to about $12 million when you're looking at the size of these clubs that are involved. UBI, big numbers out there as far as going through. UBI percentages. You notice the smallest club that I mentioned has the largest UBI percentage. And this one is up about 24% going through there. Most of that's from unrelated business income from rooms. The room revenue is pretty high in some of these things, but this is what I thought was interesting when you're looking at these city clubs, particularly the percentage of unrelated business income related to rooms. One club, 70% of their unrelated business income comes from rooms. So when you're looking at those numbers, when you're looking at that, how private are you if 70% of your unrelated business income is coming from people who probably don't even live in town? How more of the general public is that when you're looking at some of those things? This blue one right here, that's the one that I mentioned earlier today that had the board of directors, so and they left them on there. But that one advertises in the local city's hotel report. So they're booking themselves out there as hotel. Yes?
Are these clubs being shut down by the IRS as far as?
No. Again, the IRS comes out when they've been called or when there's a blatant issue that's out there.
What is this late?
Well, this is the percentage of UBI. This is blatant. This is the amount of UBI, which is 23%, 18%. But looking at it, what's blatant about the other thing is that they're advertising too. So you've got unrelated business income and they're advertising. Your problem is that the IRS is very underfunded. There's an article in Forbes saying, in the title of the article was, "The IRS sucks." But it was from the side of the employees. And they were going through and they were just saying, we're not getting the education anymore, we're not getting the training, we can't go out there and do any of this stuff. Actually, one of the partners of my firm went up on Capitol Hill when we had the ICPA saying, you got to fund them. The quality of the agents coming into the office is substantially lower than it was in the past. Except for one that's auditing one of my large clients who's really good, and that's a pain. But when you're looking at it there, so they're not getting some of the stuff, they're not getting those issues, they're not getting those other things. So it really is something that, it's blatant, but the IRS doesn't have the numbers to do it. They probably audit between 200 and 250 clubs a year when you come right down to it. That's not a whole lot of universal clubs. And normally where those come from are in little pockets all at once, when they come in. Yes?
So they're reporting on their forms that their UBI is 25%, and that's that. They're sending it in, nobody's there.
Yes. Well, I don't know whether the kids always looking at. The other issue you've got, and one of the things that irks me as a professional is you've got accounting firms out there that don't disclose the salary of the managers on the 990T. Clearly a violation of the rules. NCA actually went to them and said, you really can't require this because we're a private. And the IRS said, no, we don't care about it. But I don't compete with that accounting. There's one accounting firm who does it mainly. And I don't compete with that accounting firm, but some of the people I know do. And they're like, well, why do we have to put our information down if they don't? So it's a real issue that's out there. But no, this comes up, this is on the, it's on the 990 because you have to put down the amount of non-member use on the 990. 990Ts don't get looked at until the 990 is picked up. So they're not going to go to the 990T because they can't tell what the percentage is from the 990T anyway. So they're looking at it from the other way, going at it through here. Before I get to this thing, a couple other things we had some questions on. what is unrelated business income when we're looking at some of these issues, going through there. The long questionnaire that we're talking about, where you can't say, is the member paying for it? And he says yes. Is he being reimbursed? He says no, and then you let it go. The other issue out there is, okay, if it isn't that easy, again, if there's a personal benefit to your member from this, it can still be member income, even if there's one member and 200 of his closest friends. So if you're looking at it, generally what we're saying is that if a member is a leader in the organization, president of the company, vice president of the company, some of those type of things, he has a personal social benefit for giving the Christmas party for his club, for his business at the club. That's member income, even if he's the only member there. IRS got very specific in their requirements. They said that if it was, if the president of the company had a function at the club, the company reimbursed him for it. In that particular case, it was member business because of the personal benefit. However, if the controller in the club offered the club to his board of directors to have the function there, there was no personal benefit to the controller, and if the company paid, it was non-member business. I think sucking up is really good personal benefit when you get there. But then again, I look at the controller a little closer to see how he can afford to have the club membership. But if you're looking at something, that's how narrow they got. I mean, I've had IRS agents, they don't push it, they mention it during the course of the audit, but they wanted to disallow as non-member function an 80th birthday party for the father who was a member of the club and was paid by his kids. But it wasn't paid by the father. And they were like, oh, that's not a member. It comes down to in the days when the father of the bride used to pay for the wedding, if it was the father of the groom's club, he was reimbursed by the father of the bride, the IRS would come in and say, no, that's not member income. They never stuck to that position. I mean, they did have some reasonableness in it. But that's the type of thing that you've got with that. So those are some of the issues that really come up with the traditional, non-traditional activities going through with some of those things. Yes?
How important is having those forms filled out on hand for basically?
I think it's exceptionally important, and I think what's even more important than having the forms on hand is having a policy that they're completed and filled out and signed, and you can show. I mean, if you get 70% of them, that's great. The IRS comes in, they're going to go down and they're going to look at a list of functions, and they're going to say, I want to see documentation for these functions here, which are going to be bigger functions. So if you're looking at it, then the issue you've got there is the IRS can say you're making the effort, you're going through, you do have something out there. If you're missing a few, that's one thing. Depends on how much they want to go into it, how long it is, but it's much tougher to go back. And I've had clients under audit go back to these people and you get them to complete it. You can have your catering. This is not your controller's responsibility. Okay, this is not. It doesn't belong in the bookkeeping when the bill goes out. This belongs in the catering director's hands when they're booking the party right off the bat. You might not know the total amount at that point in time, but it is looking at. That's why it's important to do that. And people say, well, members don't want to sign it or whatever, so you just tell them, well, then we'll be subject to tax. We can lose our tax exemption. We can do a lot of that stuff. Because if it's not there and if it's not signed, it's non-member business, the way it's defined. I know one club who only gets it from members, and they just throw everything else into the non-member pot because they say, okay, if we can't get it, it's going to be non-member income. I don't like that because that doesn't show any judgment. But that's where it's going to end up if you don't have the documentation for it. Documentation is pretty specific on what they're looking for. Other questions on non-traditional activities, unrelated business income? Yes. Okay.
So, like join a city club, the purpose of joining a city club business may be a global organization.
Right.
Offering the same benefit to all the members, like I offer tenants.
You can book a room for yourself in your club, and that's member income. Okay. The reciprocal aspect of it is, since you're a member at your club, excuse me, you can book a room in the Jonathan Club in Los Angeles and stay there. You're not a member of the Jonathan Club, so that is non-member income to them. To them, not when you book a room at your club. It's there. Where you've got some problems, and this is where I'm a little bit more aggressive than most people are. Is, you know, something's either a member income or non-member income. For example, if you have a Rotary Club breakfast every Wednesday morning at your club, 60% of the people there are members, 40% are not. Well, all 60 of them write the check to the Rotary Club. The Rotary Club's going to pay. That's going to be a non-member function. Okay, if you're looking at it. You can't say 60% member, 40% non-member, because it's either all or nothing. But using the same rationale, I'm saying it's the function. So if you have a city club that has a wedding, the wedding is clearly a member function. We'll just take that as a given. But they have some guests from out of town stay at the city club. That's not picked up by the member. You know, my position is it's the function. The function is the wedding. I've only argued that when clubs are above the 15% when they're looking for things. But with the IRS coming in and looking at some of those issues, I think it's pretty. I think it's a good argument, particularly when you get to some of the unique clubs out there where people have to go to stay there. One I can think of is Rolling Rock Club in Pennsylvania. They are a hunting, fishing, golfing club, and clearly they have member functions. But sometimes the company picks up the tab for the rooms, other times the individuals. It's the exact same type of function. Why is one all member and one not? So it's just a different type of things that you're looking at when you're going there. The best way to not worry about whether it's member or non-member income is to get your members to spend a lot more. Then that 50% doesn't come into play. I do some stats every year, and I think the big stat that I've seen is that clubs do not have an expense problem. They've cut expenses to the core. Clubs have a revenue problem. Their members are not spending as much as they were 8 years ago per member, if you look at it. So it's a revenue problem, not an expense problem. And if you're looking for revenue, where else are you going to get it if you're not going to get it from the members? That's when you're going outside and doing a lot of these things that seem a little bit inappropriate. How many people allow food to go? Okay, IRS would say that that's non-traditional income, even if it's done. And how many people allow minimums to be spent on food to go? Okay, I've been quoted as saying I think that's one of the dumbest things in the world, because the whole point of a minimum is to bring them in to spend more money than the minimum is. But if you don't want to take off the member, so you allow them to do stuff like that. Any other questions on unrelated business income, non-traditional activities, spas? Anybody have spas? That's another issue that the IRS ensures a non-traditional activity not there. We're excited. So looking at some of those. So with all these things coming in, all of this stuff, and everything you've heard today, all this really uplifting information we provided to you, I guess the question is this the death of the private club? If you look at it, when I go over some of the stats, the decline in the number of private clubs going through there, how few are being built and added up, is it the death of the private club? No, they just need to evolve and remind themselves what they're there for. The people still highly value associational benefits of membership as long as it fits their lifestyle. So you have to go out and look at that. Clubs are social institutions that must respond to the changing world around them, which means you go after women professionals. I still think that is the biggest area that you guys are missing when it's out there, is that if you get them to come in. At lunchtime we were talking about the membership committee, and that they couldn't get younger members to join. Well, the membership committee are people who have been there forever. How many people, who's on your membership committee, generally, if you're going out looking for people? newer members, older members, a mix. Your membership committee should be predominantly dominated by people who've been members of the club 5 years or less. And that's because they know why they joined the club. And even more important than knowing why they joined the club, it also is a place where they know people who may not belong to other clubs. So some of your older guys out there, they only own, you know, they don't already belong to your club, they belong to another club. Whereas the young people, they've still got some, you know, some people out there who don't belong. So important to get them out there. How many people have a mentoring program when you do that? Once they come in, to make sure you're working with the members as they're in, because it's quick to, you can lose them that way. There's a difference between respect for traditions and being tradition bound. I think that's one of the big things, you know, we can't do it because we've never done it that way. Or you can respect the tradition without being tradition bound and looking at it. You can improve the success of your, quote, golf club by making it a better all-around club. I thought it was interesting that Phil Keister has, at Country Club of Virginia, has 72 holes, 54 holes. 54 holes, beautiful facilities, and he said, I've had 100,000 hits on my fitness center since I've opened it up. Well, is he a golf course or is he a fitness center? I mean, when you're looking at, he's everything, you know, so it's the whole concept of, you know, you can't, it's not all about golf. You know, it's about making a better all-around facility, all-around club. I really think that golf-only clubs, there's not going to be a whole lot of them out there by the time you're done. So where are we headed? Cyclical and secular trends continue to forecast flat to declining golf play. I love the stats from the National Golf Foundation. Being an accountant, I can make stats say almost anything. Being a lawyer, I can defend those. But if you're looking at it, going out there, the stat this year was, even though total golf rounds went down, golf rounds on days available to play went up. I mean, because of the weather was so bad and going through that, they were just saying, you know, if people could play, more people were playing when they could play. Well, I guess that's good, but there's still fewer people playing. For a club to succeed, you need to know your members, you need to know your marketplace, you need to operate with a strong sense of mission and purpose. Your A clubs are all coming back. If you're not an A club, what you want to be is you want to be the best B club in the area. So whatever you decide you're going to do, you still have to be the best at that when you're looking at it. What do we expect? Well, that's the royal we. I think the consolidation of private clubs is still going to continue. I think when you're looking at it, particularly developer-owned clubs, because they don't want to pay the subsidy anymore and they're not selling the homes. So that's a big thing. Top-tier clubs will flourish. Large city clubs will succeed going forward. Dining-only clubs are almost a thing of the past. You see just a few of them floating around now. You'll make this more growth in the semi-private sector, or decline in privacy to the middle to the lower tier. Again, that's a whole lot of what we're talking about now. You know, are you truly a private club? And that's kind of what you want to be when you're looking at it. True family clubs will prosper in the future. Gated community clubs focused on and incurring expensive golf will struggle, and golf-only clubs will struggle. So, any other comments? Any other questions? Yes.
So we're saying you can be a private club but lose your tax exempt status.
Yes. Probably if you're going to lose your tax exempt status, you're probably not a private club anyway. But you can be a taxable club and be a private club. Okay, that's different. But if you're going to lose your tax exempt status, they're probably pulling it because you've got too much non-member business, you're open to the public too much. If you've got all of those issues, you're not a private club. So you can be private and taxable, but if you're going to lose your tax exempt status, you probably lost your private status long before you lost your tax exempt status. Other questions? Okay, well, since that's 5 minutes before drinks, I think I did well. Okay, thank you very much.
I just want to add one comment to what Kevin said about privacy and private status. it seems like a year doesn't go by that we don't see at least one case, and sometimes more than one, where the issue didn't surface because somebody reported something. The issue surfaced because you had disgruntled members who sued the club. And so suddenly you're forced to protect, to defend the club in a court, and to try to demonstrate that you're truly private may be subject to certain protections, and you're unable to do it because you're suddenly finding out you were doing things that you shouldn't be doing. So things surface after the fact because you just, that you either weren't aware of it or things were a little bit over the edge, as they say. So one of the cases on Kevin's slide, one of the anonymous posts listed, that's exactly what it was. Women members of the club who were disgruntled because of gender discrimination policies. If you still have a men's only grill, if you still have tea times that are not gender neutral. It's a ticking time bomb. So think about those things if you do want to protect your private status. Thank you again to everyone for coming today. I hope you enjoyed all these programs. Thanks again to all of our speakers, especially Kevin, who's the only one left in the room. Please keep in mind the dates for our conference in May of next year. I hope you can all join us there in Chicago for some great programs. And again, we will post the presentations and the article on cybersecurity online so you have access to them. Thank you again. The reception, Ryan, is downstairs where you had lunch, starting in right now. All right, thank you.
Trip over.